Your story might be the very thing someone needs to hear in order to keep going. Hi, I'm Shara, and you're listening to Life Stories. Hi, friends. I hope you are enjoying your day. I've got my office door closed, and Penny does not understand why she can't come in here with me. She's just going to have to wait a little bit. I am enjoying the sunshine. Finally, we can be outside and it's not too cold. And I believe I saw some wildflowers in our field yesterday. I'm going to go out later and try to pick some of those. That's one of my grandkids' favorite things to do, is go on the golf cart and pick wildflowers. And so I was excited to already see some out there, some yellow and purple, I think. But I hope you're enjoying your day, whatever you're doing. I've talked about this before, and it's been coming up a lot, just in conversation, in different places in my life. And so I feel like it's something that I need to talk about again. And, you know, on this podcast, I have some great people I want to talk to on here. But also, I feel like I need to be authentic to who I am. One of the things that is very important in my life and a very big deal in my life is prayer. And I've talked about this in episode 6 when I talked about writing and I talked about my prayer journals. Prayer is just a big part of my life. It is. And when I tell you that I'm going to pray for you, to me, that's not a joke. It's not just a nice thing to say. To me, I look at prayer as conversation in a relationship with the Lord. And that's how it's always been since I've been a little girl, and it will always be that way. And I think about different times in my life when prayer has been very important, where I've seen God answer prayer or when I haven't seen Him answer prayer. And I wanted to talk about some of those today. You know, I said that when I tell you I'm going to pray for you, it's important to me. I have a friend that I grew up with, and her daughter was recently diagnosed with cancer. And I have a note sitting right here on my desk to pray for them every single day, because I want her daughter to be healed and I want them to be taken care of. And it's important to me. But I think about when my grandfather passed away, we had gone down to my grandmother's house. And I was over there. She was in the back doing something, and her best friend came over. And she wanted to talk to her, but I said, well, she's in the back. You know, she'll be out in a minute. And she said, no, I'll just come back. And so this was her best friend forever, probably longer than I have been alive. And she started to leave, and she turned around and looked at me, and she said, you know, I still pray for you every day. And I said, no, I didn't know that, but thank you. And that meant so much to me to hear those words from her, because I know how important prayer is. To know that somebody else was praying for me, that was very, very special to me. So I want to do the same for other people. I want people to know when I tell them I pray for them, I'm really going to pray for them. But I was thinking about 3 different situations that I've seen in my life that either God didn't move at all, or it didn't seem like He did. I know He did. And how He answered prayer in an incredible way. You know, if I could pray and God would do anything I wanted, our lives would look very different right now. My son would not have autism. People in my family would not be sick. They would not be struggling. You know, everybody would be healthy. Everybody would have exactly every single thing that they need. And it doesn't always work like that. And I think about my friend Melanie. If I could just pray and everything could happen the way I wanted to, my friend Melanie would still be alive. She would still be taking care of her 5 children, and life wouldn't have changed at all. She would have been healed of cancer and not have had to go through all the stuff that she did, and her family wouldn't have had to go through that. But that's not what happened. You know, we had thousands of people were praying for her, literally thousands of people. We were all wanting her to be healed and to not be sick anymore. And that's not what happened. God knows better than we do. He knows things that we don't know. And so I don't understand it, and I'm not going to try to explain it. He just knows better, and we have to trust that He knows better and that He has reasons that we don't understand. That's all I know about prayers like that. That's the only thing I can say. I don't know. I'm not God. I don't know. I don't understand. But I trust that He does. And I think about times that God answered prayers, but not exactly the way I wanted to. And it's a funny story. I told this to my aunt recently when she was here, and she said, this is the best story I've ever heard. Several years ago, we were living in another house. My daughter was still in high school. My grandmother and a different aunt had come to visit, and we were trying to sell our Durango. We had a Dodge Durango, which I loved that car. That was our first SUV, and I loved that car. We took lots of vacations in that car. It was the first car that we had that had 3 rows, and so when I would go places with my kids, everybody had their own row and nobody had to touch anybody else. It was great. They loved all their space. But we were trying to sell it, and so where we lived, there was a gas station on the highway, driving into where our neighborhood was, and across the street from the gas station was an empty field, and people would park their cars there to sell. And so we had information on the car and our phone number and everything, and we would park the Durango there and leave it for a while and then come back and get it. So my grandmother and my aunt are with me. Aaron was at work, and we were going to watch my daughter play softball. And as we're walking out of it still makes me laugh. My nanny. We're walking out of the garage, and Nanny put her hand on my Durango, and she said, "Lord, whatever it takes." Like, to sell it, that was her prayer. Whatever it takes. Well, that's a very bold prayer. And I appreciated her praying that we would sell our car because we wanted to get a newer vehicle, and we needed to sell that one in order to do it. So I drove the Durango and parked it in the field, and my aunt took me and my grandmother and probably my boys to the softball field, and we watched my daughter play softball, and then we all went out to eat. So on the way home, after eating, they were going to drop me off at the Durango to pick it up so that we could go home, except the Durango was gone. When we got back, it had been stolen. At first, I was just so confused when we pulled up, and I was like, where? I knew in my head Aaron hadn't picked it up because he was in the car in front of me, but I didn't understand what was happening. Anyway, somebody stole the car. They drove it to Amarillo or somewhere in West Texas and burned it up. I don't know. We got money from the insurance, which helped pay, go towards our Suburban that we ended up buying. God answered her prayer. It just wasn't the way I wanted to. Maybe we couldn't have sold it for as much as we were trying to sell it for. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten as much money as we did from the insurance company. But it still makes me laugh when I think about that story because God answered that prayer. He just didn't do it the way I wanted him to do it. But then there are times when God answers a prayer that is so crazy. I have no other story like this in my life, and I might not ever have another story like this in my life, but I am not creative enough to make this up. I promise you. I've told this story so many times because it even amazes me, and I lived it. And so here's what I want to say before I tell you the story. I don't believe that you just list all things that you want and God just does what you want. I don't believe that's how it works. But I believe that God looks at our hearts. He knows what we need, and he looks at our hearts, and sometimes he just shows off. Sometimes he just does incredible things, just so much greater than we can expect. And so that happened to me, to my family, in 1998. Okay, actually, 1996. Aaron got into PT school, which is an amazing feat in itself because in 1996, he was 23. I was 22. We had 3 children. 23 and 22 had 3 children. And he got into all 4 physical therapy schools that he applied to, which is crazy because it's extremely competitive. It was back then. I'm sure it still is now. I don't know how we did that. That was it's a miracle we survived all of that. But anyway, we did. He got into physical therapy school. So in 1996, there was no internet. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that. So in order to look for a place to live in the area where we were going, we had to drive to that area and go buy a newspaper and go to the payphone and make phone calls. And so we ended up finding a house in Alvin, Texas. I called the number. We found a little house. The man that owned the house met us there. We put down a deposit. We, had his address. He lived on the other side of Houston. Alvin is south of Houston. He lived on the other side of Houston. I don't even remember his name. Honestly, I don't remember his name. And I only saw him when we met him to get the house. And then he came a couple of times over the next few years while we were there. And then when we moved out. But I had his address and I would mail him a check every month for the rent. So In 1998, it was about a year before Aaron got out of physical therapy school, I began praying for a house. I was very bold in my prayer for a new house. I didn't know where we were going to live. Honestly, I didn't care. I just wanted a house that was ours with a real job and not living on school loans, where we could actually go to the store and buy nice things. But I began making a list of things. I wish I still had a copy of that prayer list. But I wrote, like 4 bedrooms. I wanted 4 bedrooms because I wanted a guest room, and I thought that sounded extravagant. Having a guest room just sounded extravagant. I wanted my boys would share, my daughter could have a room, we would have a room, we'd have a guest room. I wanted 2 bathrooms, not just 1 bathroom. I wanted a 2-car garage. We'd never had a garage before. These are not crazy things, but at the time they seemed just like a mansion. And so I had this whole long list of things that I was praying for, and it was on a piece of notebook paper, and I had it on my kitchen windowsill. And we didn't have a dishwasher. I was the dishwasher. And so every day I would dream about this house, and I would just thank God for providing this house for us. And I just believed he was going to do it. Not because I deserved any kind of good thing, not because it was a reward, not because, I'm asking, so God's going to do it. I knew he would provide a home for us. And so every day, felt like 100 times a day, I washed dishes. I would pray over this house, and I would just dream about this new house we were going to have. And my list was so long that I would hide it from people. We had life group in that house, and I would hide it and put it away when people came over because I didn't want anybody to see it. I thought they're going to think I'm crazy when they look at this list, and I don't want them to see it. So I would put it away. And one time I forgot, and we had life group over there, and the women were in the living room, and the guys went in the kitchen to pray. And one of the guys said something about my list, and he kind of made a joke about it, like, you really think you're going to get all that stuff? And I was embarrassed, but it didn't keep me from praying. I just put it away, made sure it was put away before anybody else came over. Anyway, for a year I prayed for that, and I just knew God was going to provide. He was going to take care of us. And several months, I don't know how many months before, Aaron began applying for jobs. Like all these students who were getting ready to graduate began applying for jobs, and something happened in the therapy world. I don't know, there was like major cuts to Medicare or something. And so PT jobs were not to be found. I'm not sure if it was home health was cut, and so the people that were in home health jobs went to the hospitals and inpatient, outpatient, all that. Anyway, Aaron couldn't find a job, and he had gone on 2 interviews, and the job just fell through. And then one of the interviews that was set up fell through before he even got to the interview. And I went from being on cloud 9, believing God was going to do this great thing and provide this incredible house, to being so angry and nearly depressed because I thought, we have wasted 3 years of our lives. I mean, how much faith is that? We have wasted 3 years of our lives. He has worked so hard, all this hardship on our family, and now he can't even get a job. I mean, I was mad. I was very upset. That was so stupid. It was so stupid. But, I mean, I'm human, That's how I felt. And then, of course, that's not what happened. One of the guys in Aaron's PT class got married. His name was Don. Don got married in Corpus Christi. We did not go to the wedding. We did not want to take 3 kids all the way down there to that wedding, so we didn't go. At the wedding, Don's college roommate was there, and his name was Howard. Howard lived in West Texas, and he was looking for a PT. And, here's all these students at the wedding about to graduate looking for jobs. And he said, we need a physical therapist to move out to West Texas. He was a chiropractor, and he worked with 2 other chiropractors, and they were also wanting to have physical therapy in their building. So he was looking for a PT. Well, Colby, who was another one of the students, Colby told Howard about Aaron. And he said he's got a family. He's already had 1 interview in West Texas. He probably will be willing to drive out there. So he gave Howard Aaron's phone number. So Howard called the house, and he talked to Aaron, and he said, I want to fly you and your wife out to West Texas for an interview. Y'all can come look at the area. You can look at the job. We really, need somebody out here. And so Aaron agreed, of course. I mean, we didn't care where we were going, but he needed a job. So He called our landlord, which, like I said, I don't even remember his name. He called our landlord and said, hey, I'm sorry, but if I'm flying out to West Texas, if I get this job, I'm going to have to move in 2 weeks. I can't give you 30 days notice. The landlord said, you're going to Big Spring? That's where we ended up moving. And Aaron said, yes. And he said, are you going to work for Howard Hornsby? And Aaron said, yes, I am. Do you know Howard? Howard was a student of our landlord's probably before Aaron and I were born. Our landlord had taught at a Bible college in Houston, and Howard was one of his students. And our landlord is who introduced Howard to Jesus. He's the one that led him to the Lord. And so there is no way that I'm creative enough to come up with this story and make these connections. I talked about how my word this year is connection, and I'm still amazed at the connections that are being made in my life. I mean, weekly I'm meeting new people, and anyway, I'm not creative enough to come up with this story, I'm telling you. Long before Aaron and I knew each other, maybe before we were born, God was connecting our landlord to Howard, and then Howard to Dawn, and then Dawn to Aaron. I mean, I can't make that up. I just can't. So Aaron got off the phone and we were just floored. We couldn't believe, how this is all panning out. And we knew we were heading in the right direction. So we flew out to West Texas. We went to the clinic. We met everybody. We went to lunch. And then Aaron went back to the clinic for the interview. And then I went with the man that owned all of the business. And I didn't go with him. I went with his wife and the office manager, and they wanted to help me find a place to live. We went and looked at a few different places. None of them were very appealing. One of them was a house in the backyard, went down a hill, which, 3 little kids, I don't think so. One was a second-story apartment, which she was trying to put off for me to have to get because, again, 3 little kids. But, I was going to take what I could get. And, this prayer list that I had for my house was not something I was expecting to get when I got there. I figured eventually we would have that. We just literally just needed a place to live if Aaron was going to take this job. So we couldn't find anything. And the woman who was driving me around, she called a realtor that she knew, and she said, hey, we have a family that's moving out here. They really need to find a place to live. We can't find anything to rent. Do you have anything available or something that's for sale that the owner would be willing to rent out? And he said, well, I have one house. He may be willing to rent it, but it's got 7 bedrooms. She was like, 7 bedrooms? He said, does she want to look at it? And I said, well, might as well. I knew we couldn't afford it, but we might as well because, there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to look at. So we went to this house, and it wasn't anything fancy. It was in a neighborhood with, all the houses were the exact same size. They kind of all looked alike. The family had several children, and so they added on a second story. That's why there were 7 bedrooms. It was, it was cute. It was nothing fancy. We go in, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, it's nice. It's plenty roomy, obviously. It did have 7 bedrooms. It also had 4 bathrooms. It had 2 living areas. It was on the corner, and so it had a carport in the front and then a 2-car garage and driveway on the side. Had a fenced-in backyard. Huge utility room, which was one of the things that I was really wanting because I'd never had a utility room. It had everything that I wanted, but double, pretty much. Pretty much double. Oh, I forgot to mention this. When I made my prayer list, okay, this was in, 98? He graduated in 99, so 98. I didn't know anything about credit scores or debt to income ratio or how much money he was going to be making at his first job. I didn't know any of that. But when I made my prayer list, I thought I need to write a price on here because, when I pray, I want to know that it's God that's answering. I want to be specific so I know that it's the Lord that's answering. So I wrote down $80,000 because I thought that sounds like a good price. 4-bedroom house. This was, a long time ago. I didn't know what I was doing. It just sounded like a good number. We're looking around this house. I'm talking to the realtor, and Aaron hasn't seen it yet. I said, how much is he asking for this house? Because, first of all, is he going to let us rent it? And if he is and we have to buy it, how much is it? Because I thought, there's no way we're going to be able to afford this. And he said, the house is for sale for $67,000. $67,000, well below my $80,000 that I just threw out there because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was like, okay, this is a little bit crazy. After Aaron's interview, we went back to the house so he could look at it. And the realtor had talked to the owner at this point and said he would rent it to us for 6 months for the same rent we were paying in Alvin. And then we were able to buy the house for $67,000. Now, not every prayer that I have ever prayed turns out like that. I mean, God, I can always tell that God's involved in issues that I pray about, but things don't always turn out that big. But I am so thankful for this story, even for myself. Even if nobody is ever encouraged by this story, I'm encouraged because I know it's true. I remember how I felt when I was praying for our home. I remember what it felt like when we found out all those connections that God had made with the people lining us up for the job to move out to Big Spring. I remember the prayer list and the people that knew about my prayer list before God answered those prayers. I remember all those things, even if nobody else is ever encouraged, but people are always encouraged because this is something crazy. You know, one of the things that one of the things that I often pray when I'm praying for my children or I'm praying for, certain situations is that God would do things that I can't do. He can make those kind of connections in our lives. He can provide those big things in our lives. And I don't want to pray to a God that I can do the same things as. You know what I mean? I don't want to pray to a God who is limited in power like I am, who is limited in a lot of things like I am. I want to pray to a God who can do anything. Because sometimes I need him to do anything. Something big and crazy. And, I want him to do what I can't do. And that's a crazy story, but it's all true. I hope that encourages you, and I hope that you begin praying more than you ever have before, because right now, the way the world's going, I think it is most important. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.